My great pleasure to welcome Janine O'Keeffe. Janine, you have now the duty to speak as, after all these legal experts, as I think by education you're an engineer. You come originally from Australia, so another Australian here with us, which is great. But you've been living the last couple of years in Sweden, where you've been one of those who started this, I call it the new climate movement, meeting Greta just shortly after she started her school strikes for climate, and then being one of those brains behind the Fridays for Future and also Parents for Future movement. Now, after you heard that, and of course we are all aware that many of those who brought those cases to court are coming from the climate movement, are coming from the Fridays, in particular the young generation, the Fridays movement. We are very much interested in hearing from you how you see this as part of the overall, let me say, strategy that the climate movement has. Of course, those demonstrations are an important part. Working with science is an important part, but it seems that litigation, legal cases have to be and are already a core part of the global climate movement. Janine, welcome to you. And now the floor is open for your remarks.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. Thank you for a beautiful introduction. I am part of the Fridays for Future movement, and I'm also working and long-term member of Extinction Rebellion. Most probably the significant contribution is the work behind me with the map and helping people find each other, which is a key part in movement work. I was personally pleasantly surprised to hear 900 cases. So immediately I imagine 900 pins on a map around the world. So every litigator can find each other. Some of them will be obviously doing human rights. Some of them will be doing constitutional law. Some of them will be doing individual against Shell. And they need to be able to find each other. And that's one thing I hope would be a step forward in building this movement of energy, of basically challenging the powerful, be it in the governments, be it in the very, be it in the big fossil fuel companies, but also in other companies, which often use or rely upon mechanisms of oppression. And we need to find ways to bring that forward. And I must thank you each. I've been really very inspired both by the German case and the Australian case. And I was very early inspired when I started the work with Fridays for Future. By the Children's Trust, which is an amazing work in the US. And there are, in Sweden, I would say we're actually well behind much of the work I'm seeing. Just recently in an XR case, the court ruled that, let me just find the wording, that there was not enough, the situation was not acute enough for self-defense. So you could not do, you were fined for any action within Extinction Rebellion because the court said the climate is not acute enough. Even though the UN has declared climate emergency, the EU has declared climate emergency, Sweden thinks there's no problem. There's not enough of a problem. And therefore we have many countries who have many ways to go forward in this work. And we have many activists who can actually reach into using the court to actually bring their cases forward and make it stronger. There is actually a student case here in Sweden. It may actually change legislation here. I hope it does. Sweden, just to give you a small understanding, Sweden has a climate law, but it is not in line with Paris. And the government isn't actually doing enough to be in line with the climate law either. It's statistically recently understood that the government is doing approximately half, which is needed for Paris. And let us not forget, Paris is often 2 degrees, not 1.5. And there's a significant difference between 1.5 and 2. And in fact, it's probably human extinction. We want to go for 1.5. And if we miss 1.5, we want to go for 1.51 and 1.52. And we want to stay as low as possible. So from a global movement perspective, this is a really challenging conversation. And there's obviously many people who've thought about this far greater than I have. So it would be great to have a bit of a brainstorm to understand how to bring the law forward. One of the dreams I've had for a long time, and this is just off the top of my head, but that every, let's say, year 9 class, one of their yearly projects was to take their government to court. Now, this is clearly would possibly require far more lawyers than are currently involved in the climate movement. But I think it is actually possible if we could actually sort of, streamline what is the process you take, what are the steps you take, and how do you actually go through those steps? Because there's many teachers who read this, would happily read in detail some of these court cases and work out how to buffer their students into this process. The key in this work, whether you're taking every class is possibly taking their government to court, is not the winning the case from my perspective. We need to turn the conversation into how many youth find a voice. That is the key thing. And if I refer to, even if we refer back to many of the brilliant comments in this in this webinar, but one of them was about we don't have sufficient solutions. Well, and maybe there's not enough wind, and maybe there's not enough solar power ready. But the truth is, our government has a requirement to take consumption down, to change our laws so people minimize their utilization. And that is the key aspect. If we don't have the technology, we must use what is normally known in the IT world as user case. As we change the user model, we change the system, we make the economic system work towards living within our planetary boundaries. Does that give you a few ideas? And maybe, Stefan, I hand back to you.
Thank you very much. I think, Janine, that was kind of excellent summary. But I think that case that you just mentioned at the end it's even not so much I see at the moment. We are not yet at the point that we wouldn't have enough wind or solar or anything. But that's what I also had hoped until we started touching it. Make governments removing the barriers so that we can use those sources. At the moment, is no problem. It's obviously less of a problem in some countries to build a new coal mine than a wind farm. How can that be? And what are the implications of such now jurisdictions, of such decisions? And what can we do to strengthen the impact that this kind of decision diffuses, for example, into the energy sector? Or of course, we know that agriculture at the end of the day is also, and other sectors are also involved in and also need to change. So I think that is where that networking makes a lot of sense. People are aware of what's going on. They have the right information. And that's why I also mentioned to you, next to the social movement, it's also important to, of course, work with science and to work with the right experts and the right people. And for me, it's, by the way, also so great that we have now, I know in Germany, there's also Lawyers for Future. I'm sure that exists also in other parts of the world. You have Psychologists for Future, you have Artists for Future. So many professional groups are now willing to contribute to all this.
Absolutely. And I honestly think what you see here is that you got this group was really a movement in itself. Wind 15, 30 years ago was actually a movement in itself. And then it's actually grown now to encompass and bolster the law process, and in our last webinar, where you actually talked about community groups creating new energy, that is actually in many ways a grassroots movement. And that, so the structure and the way to actually build together is fairly similar.
Tobias, I see your hand is raised. Would you like to?
Yeah, thank you, Janine, for this inspiring comment. And I really liked your phrase. It's not about winning the case. I think it's, well, you try to win and then you lose, but one day you will win. And I think it's about spreading the word. What we are doing today, and just a small from me, well, it's history, but when I was a student in 2003, 2004, I was member, and I'm still member of a small German solar association, and they said, we should forbid the use of coal. And even me, as I liked Hermann Scher and renewable energy, I said, whoa, that's really a hard approach to forbid the use of coal. But finally, from 2004 15, 20 years later, Germany forbid the use of coal and decided to phase out of coal. So I would like to encourage our friends from Australia to think also the unthinkable, that, well, at the moment you're earning money and the coal industry is very strong, but I think it's possible also to use the coal use. And just the last phrase, I like a phrase from the former energy minister from Saudi Arabia who said, well, the era of stone, the age of stone didn't end because there were no stones, but because humanity, well, decided that they can use something else, which is better. And I think we are also in this phase where we know that renewable energy is better than fossil fuels, so we should just do it. Yeah, thank you.
I fully agree with that. And if I work on your comments to the next step, I think we can actually move forward with this process, because for example, in Australia, you have 70,000 or 150,000 students screaming on the streets each time. And Australia was the first ones to do the November 30th, 2018, with 15,000 students supporting Fridays for Future and School Strike for Climate. They are strong, they are brilliant, and people are listening. And just like if we think about the gay movement, one of the judges said, I can't judge against this person, because if I go home, my grandchildren will slaughter me. So let's use that power. Each judge has a family.
Yeah, I think that is a kind of almost very good concluding remark. When I look at the time, it is time to wrap up, unfortunately. Although this discussion is certainly something that we should continue. And Tobias, now we are going to prepare further sessions on this for sure. I think that, well, as I said before, this webinar, you can see that it's live broadcasted on YouTube. It will be available after, I think, some time. YouTube takes some time to then make it available. We will, of course, certainly share the links, and also those presentations will be uploaded here as well. From my side, thank you very much to all of you, particularly our speakers, for inspiring, very knowledgeable presentations that we heard today, that we were just able to touch upon this issue. But I think it's a very important topic, and it's a new momentum, and we're going to continue working on that. With this, I would again say thank you and goodbye. And for the final words, hand over back to Peter And let me say, those listening to us and joining, like Peter, but also Jeremy, of course, in Australia, a great thank you for staying with us at this time of the day. It's quite late there. Peter, the last words for you.
Yes, thank you very much, Stefan. And thank you very much to all of the speakers. It's been a very interesting and a very educational, I think, session. It's one in which I've been stimulated to add another suggestion. And just very briefly, something which is working quite well in Australia is that the Australian Securities and Investment Commission and some retired judges and other people are talking about the issue of whether it's negligent on the part of a company director to the board of a company to not have regard to measuring what might happen to that company as a result of climate change. And I think that's probably going to be the one which is going to force more change more rapidly. And already we see that the major big business organisations are changing and changing very rapidly. They're coming out in support of climate measures. They're coming out in response to the suggestion that it may be negligent, and probably is negligent, for them to not have due regard to protecting their investors' money by taking appropriate measures to protect against climate change. So with that added bit, can I say to everybody, thank you to those who've organised, thank you to those who've participated, and may we all go forward in achieving the sort of objectives that we've talked about in this session. Thank you very much.
Have a good night, have a good day, have a good afternoon, wherever you are.
Thank you. Bye.
Very well.